I turn
I
it
guess
over to
everybody else.
Tom.
Can everybody hear me back there in the cheap seats? All right, good. Steve, would you bring up my agenda? What I'm going to do today is I'm going to demo a off-center winged bowl. So it's off-center, but it's also winged. So it's a little bit different. This is my example. It's not a very good example. I had a minor turning accident that kind of interfered with me finishing this bowl for a while, and still have the Band-Aid on to prove it. But do you know the difference between a professional and an amateur? Where's Zeller? Where's Tom Zeller? Is he in here? Okay. Well, we turn together almost every Thursday. There's a group of us that get together. And one day Tom was turning on the lathe, and he had something spinning on the lathe. And I said, Tom, get your hand away from there, because he was getting really close to the thing. Well, a week or so later, we get together again, and I look over and I said, Tom, what happened to your arm? And he goes, I didn't take some friend's advice. And he caught his arm on a piece of wood that was spinning. Okay, just a scrape, no big deal. Amateur stuff. When I was turning this piece, which had a very square edge on it, and it's also off-center, so you can't really see it real well as it's spinning, I did the professional job, and 5 stitches later, and so it delayed this thing, so it's not finished very well, okay? It's not sanded very well, but it's the only sample I had. Here you go. This is one that I'd done previously. It's a much larger bowl, and as you can see, the entire top is beaded. So there's a lot of different options you can do when you do these. You can leave it plain like this. Well, this one, I thought with this particular piece of wood, I didn't need to do anything else. But that walnut piece, which is about 13 inches in diameter, I beaded the entire top. So there's some challenges in doing this. And I guess we can pass this around. And whoever gets it last, bring it up to me, because I will need it again. So you're going to start out with something that looks something like this. This one's about 10 inches in diameter. And, recommended thickness, and I will have copies of that agenda to that outline for you later. 2.5 to 3 inches. You can go down to 2 inches if you're real careful. We're going to mount this 4 different times, different ways. We're going to use a screw chuck or a worm screw. So if you're going to do a piece that's 2 inches thick, you got to be real careful how far you drill those holes, because you have to drill 2 of them, so that you have room then when you take off the recess that's going to be on the back. So here's my suggestions for laying it out. Is get your first piece round. And I don't know about you guys, but I know a lot of people use things like this to to bandsaw their bowls. And then I just put it on there and see what looks good and what I think looks appropriate. And I think, we got above. Okay, this is 8 1/4. It's too big in my mind for a 10-inch bowl. And 7, that might be a little too small. So what I did is I used a compass. I resorted to a compass. And I don't know how clearly you'll be able to see this, but there's actually a 7.5-inch ring there. And I think that became the appropriate size for this one. So you'll also see I have 2 points marked. One is the center, and one is the off-center. So we're going to drill a hole in there for my worm screw. Now my worm screw needs a 5/16 hole. So the only key to this is you want to try and drill this thing in as straight as you can. And I go about 3/4 of an inch deep, and I'm just going to do them both. That one wasn't very straight, but it'll be fine. The other thing is, you wouldn't want your second hole in line with the grain, because you'd be a lot more likely for this piece to crack when you put the second one in. Putting a lot of stress on the wood. Okay, so we're going to put on a worm screw, and all right, so I got it on there most of the way, and you can see I've got pretty large jaws on here. The bigger the jaws, the more secure you're going to be. So once I get it up close, I lock the spindle and tighten it down pretty good. And always use the tailstock. Probably should have asked this before now, but do we have a smaller tool rest for this lathe? Okay, all right. So as in most everything we do, step one is make it round, okay? And so this is no different. The other thing is, for best results on this kind of a turning, it's best if your wood is a uniform thickness. And if you look at that bowl that's coming around, you'll see that the rim on it is thinner on one side than it is on the other. And that's because the plank wasn't uniform. So the more uniform, more parallel these sides are to each other, the better your results are going to be. So get a little speed up here. Nice heavy lathe makes it easier. And I'm just going to use my roughing gouge to make this thing round. And put on my face mask. A little late, but I've got it. The other thing is you don't want to use really wet wood for this because you're going to get so much movement in it, but you don't want it super dry either. If it's too dry, it just makes it really hard to turn. Okay. All right, so that's good for now. And by the way, the holes, that's actually going to end up being the top of the bowl. Get a little more room here. Okay, so I want to flatten the bottom. And somewhere, where did I put it? There's always something that you forget to get out. So just going to check the bottom, and I'm pretty flat along the edges. I'm thick here, but that's where the recess is going to go. So I'm going to leave that alone. And I'm going to have to move away the tailstock now, which when you're turning on a worm screw, you want to be a little cautious and definitely make sure you're out of the line of fire. I mean, this thing is mounted on here pretty good. It's not going anywhere, but safety counts, as I found out when I turned the other piece. So I need about a 2 1/8 inch recess on here. And, there's a lot of ways you can do this. You can use a divider and mark it off. But I find that I just mark a line on there and measure it. And I'm somewhere between those two. And that should be close enough. Sir? It's not tall enough. I have that same problem with the light on my lathe, one of those magnetic lights. I'm always banging my head on it. You're going to have to pull it out a little more. You got it? Okay. So I'm just going to use a parting tool here to make my recess. And I don't want a very deep recess because I'm going to have to do another one after this. Well, that's really a little deeper than I needed, but that's okay. And it's a dovetail, so here's my dovetail maker. It's just a skew. This also flattens the bottom of your recess at the same time. If you have any questions, just yell. If I don't know the answers, I'll make something up, no problem. Okay, so I'm done with that now. So now I'm going to take it off the worm screw. I hope. And I'm going to change chucks. I hope on that one too. Okay. I get very lazy about changing jaws on chucks. So I find it better just to have multiple chucks. Not cheaper, but makes things easier. So now we'll mount it this way. If I turn the screw the right way. And I'm going to bring up the tailstock again. Now, just move. Oh, that's all right. This is my normally preferred live center, but because I've got a hole drilled in the middle of this thing, I find that a cone center works a lot better. So it'll fit right in that hole where that one will maybe give me a little bit of a wobble. Myself a little more room here. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to establish the thickness of the wing, and I want to take off some of the weight on the bottom of the bowl. I'm turning on center right now. So I want to turn the outside of the bowl down more or less to this way, not to here. Follow me? We're just going to take off some of the weight, round it out, because once I go off center, I'm going to slow things way down, and it's going to do a lot of bumping and grinding. It gets to be a bumpy ride there for a while. And I demonstrated this once before for the show-me-woodturners. And I quickly found out that I can't complete this project in a reasonable time for a demo. So I'm going to show you all the steps, but I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to change this blank off and put a different one on that's more completely turned. So now it's running on center, it's nice and true, so I can hog off a bunch of this wood pretty easily. I'm sorry about that on the cleanup crew. And it's always good to start with nice sharp tools. Like Ken was saying, you know, this is a lot of my tools are Thompsons. This is a Thompson tool. I don't know anything about what the M2, M4, whatever. Thompson calls this powdered steel. I don't know. So I want to establish the thickness of my wing. So I'm just going to kind of come in here straight and not do that, I hope. Okay. And again, the only thing I'm worried about is having the edge top about that size, okay? And this is also going to establish the thickness of that wing. And I'll clean up my mess here. Shear scrape it a little bit. I think I need a little more wing. Okay, so now that I've established the wing on the narrow part, I can take more of this weight off. So I just need to think about if this were a bowl that it wasn't going to be moved off center, what would the shape of this be? And I can make that shape now. Then when I do get off center, it'll be a little better balanced. So I can waste away more of this. And I think I'm going to make that wing a little bit bigger, that rim, just a little bit bigger than I had it. Yeah, I got a bit of a bump there. Let's get rid of that. This is not a very good piece of wood. It's quite punky. Yeah, it's really punky on the end grain. Okay, so one of the things that I've figured out is it doesn't matter what tool you use, it doesn't matter what procedure you use, it's what your end result is. If you like carbide tools, use carbide tools. If you like scrapers, use scrapers. If you like Thompson tools, if that works for you, that's good. So I'm just going to try and scrape this a little bit, see if I can get some of that cleaned up. Now at this point in time, this is the last time I'm going to be able to use a tool on a lot of that wing. So I want to make sure it's about as good as I can get it. And the same holds true for at least the portion of the bowl that is going to be along the small part of the wing. This is such a different turning. I don't know sometimes what good terminology is that people can understand, but now I need to put another recess. I'm sorry, I need to flip this around again. Put it back in the screw chuck in the off-center hole. So that's mounted twice so far. We're going for number 3 now. And like everything else we do, there's, I'm sure, multiple ways that this can be mounted and turned. And we'll go back to the big chuck. Again, for the same reason, we got more contact surface with the bottom of the bowl, or the top of the bowl in this case, actually. So it makes it a more secure hold. And depending on what kind of worm screw you have, some of them have flat sides on them. So you got to make sure the flat is against the jaws of the chuck, not the round part. And now we're going to go back on here, off center. Okay. Okay. Come on. Let's bring some tailstock support back up. And I need to flatten the top again. And make a new recess. And with a lot less speed now, since we're off center. And it gets a little bumpy when you hit that old recess. And you're not hitting it all the way around. And so I don't get bit again. And I'm going to move the tailstock out of the way. And the only thing I'm really concerned about now is getting a flat enough spot for a recess. And making enough room that I can get to it. Okay, just do it. Okay, this doesn't have to be a pretty cut in here because this is actually going to end up being the inside of the bowl. So it just needs to be Okay, now make sure we're clearance because we're off. So now we're going to turn the outside of the bowl, and this is where things can get a little bumpy. As you'll see here. And you actually have to remove a fair amount of wood here. And you got to do it all the way out to the bottom of that, the wing there. You can't get up a whole lot of speed until you get a large portion of this removed. So I'm right about 600 RPMs now, and that's about as good as I'm going to be able to get it for a while. Okay, and this is where I'm going to switch to the other piece of wood. Rather than ride the bucking bronco for another 20 minutes, I'm going to use this piece. And swap out my chucks again. And now as you can see, the bottom on this, it's done. It's established what the bottom of the bowl is going to look like. I don't know which camera I'm on here. Okay. And I've got a recess in here. So I'm going to mount it back on the chuck in the recess. Well, maybe I am. Okay. Could I have used a tenon on this? Why not, Tom? Yeah. I could have used a tenon for the turn where it was on center. But once you go off center, if you've got a tenon on there, you're putting an awful lot of stress on that little piece of wood that makes the tenon. Where with the recess, you've got all that extra wood out there that supports it. So it's a lot more secure in a recess in this case. Okay, so this is the fourth mount. I just want to spin this thing and see how flat the top looks. Stand here right in the line of fire, so if it comes off, it's going to catch you right in the face. But it looks pretty good. So I think the top is pretty flat. And the ruler says the top is pretty flat. So that's gone. So now I'm mounted in the chuck. I'm off center, but I don't have to touch the off center portions anymore. Just got to turn out the bowl. Excuse me. And this is pretty much like turning any other bowl. You can do push cuts, you can do pull cuts if you want. Whatever works for you. Trying not to knock it off the chuck. That'll help. So now, even though that I'm off balance with that wing out there, there's enough weight that I'm up to about 850 RPMs, and I could probably go faster. Okay, so you got to be a little bit cautious about how wide I can make this bowl, because it's hard to see when you're off center like that. And one way to do it is you can look at your bowl here and kind of get an idea where you're at. Like on the narrow part of the wing over here, my wing is just over ½ an inch. So if I want to have a bowl thickness of 1/4 inch, that means my bowl has to end at 3/4 of an inch. Follow me? So I'll put a line here. And that tells me how much I can take out of the middle. And the way I shape the bottom of this thing is just a pretty simple shape. So I'm just going to try and match that on the inside. And on the top rim, you can do anything on there. You can texture it, you can inlay it with something, you can bead it. You know, there's you have a little bit of a playground out there. out here on the rim where you've got this wide area, you can do all kinds of different things, with texturing, with beading, with an inlay. You could do a stone inlay in there if you wanted to. There's, a lot of different options of what you can do out there. Well, my sharp tool is seemingly no longer sharp, so we'll switch out. And I normally don't turn the lathe off to adjust the tool rest. It's a good practice to do it, but with an off-center piece like this, it's just not worth the risk. This really isn't a great piece of wood. Any ideas on how I'm going to get that recess off the bottom after this is done? Leave it? Just leave the recess in there? Well, I could leave it there, I guess. I don't think I'd like that. Well, the way I take the recess off is in a vacuum chuck. So I'll turn this thing around, put it in a vacuum chuck. Actually, that's the 5th chucking method on this thing. Put it on a vacuum chuck and then clean up the bottom. You could do it on a jam chuck. You could do it on coal jaws, I guess. So right now, I am about 1.5 inches deep. And I've got 2 3/8, but I've got a recess there. So you take off, 1/4 inch, take off 3/8 at least just to be safe, which means I can take the bottom of the bowl to 1 7/8 safely. Okay, and I'm at 1.5, so I'm getting closer. And I'm also getting closer to this crazy edge out here too. Okay, so I'm still pretty thick right here and way thick down here. And if I had a double bevel on this tool, it'd be a lot easier to go across the bottom. Okay, so let's see what we got. Still pretty thick there. Still pretty thick on the bottom too. I can take more off the bottom. And keep my hand the heck away from that wing. Okay. And now I'm going to switch to a scraper. It's a big bowl scraper. It's pretty wide, pretty heavy. It works well for smoothing that thing out. I'm going to get rid of this thing so I don't get Turner's elbow. Well, other than the punky wood, that's not too bad. This is a little bit more of a challenge to use across the bottom of a bowl. And certainly you can do it with a bowl gouge, but this flat scraper. Okay, stay put. In my mind, the flat scraper works best. You'll end up with less tool marks and a more uniform surface. Now, if you're a purist and you think that scrapers are, communistic or something, well, use your bowl gouge. Okay, so there is quite a bit of tear out right in here on the end grain again. So I'm going to try to use this scraper. And with this kind of a scraper, it just takes little wispy cuts off. And it's all about the burr on this. See a little bit of a burr on there. And the burr doesn't last very long. And when you get rid of it, it virtually won't cut at all. And use the tool pretty much parallel to the floor. If anything, the handle a little high to get the best cut from it. And on this piece of wood, I don't know that there is a best cut. that's better. Right down here at the bottom is where it was the worst. Okay, one thing I didn't talk about, and I should have, is sanding this thing. When you're doing the off-center turn on the bottom of this bowl, that's the time to sand it if you want to power sand it. Like right now, I can't sand this. Okay. I'm sorry, I am off-center now. Yes, I can sand this now. I can't sand this edge. Can't sand this edge. Can't sand under here very well because I'll run right off the edge of the... I can sand the inside of the bowl, no problem. I can sand the bottom of the bowl, no problem. But the rest of it is going to be a bit of a challenge. And I'm not going to sand much. But I'll sand a little. So get the speed down. And out here, not a problem. Not a problem. Running nice and smooth. I can do that. Inside the bowl, no problem, because we're running on center.
Which way is that drill turning?
It's turning forward. Okay. Come out here on this wing and try and sand and see what happens. That. You can't really do that. So to sand out here, you can do it with the lathe stationary, or you can take it off the lathe and do it. Out on this edge, the same thing. You can't do it with it spinning on the lathe. Could have done that out here while it was on, actually when it was on center. Could have sanded this edge, which would have been the smart thing to save. But you can't do it now on the lathe. You can't power sand. You also can't power sand the underneath of the wing very well. You're going to have that same hit and miss sanding. With the actual bottom of the bowl, or the sides of the bowl actually, and the inside of the bowl, you can sand, you can finish, you can do whatever you want to do with it. Finish it sanding sealer, finish it Yorkshire grit, whatever you want to do to make it finish better. Okay, so at this point, it's really pretty much done with the exception of finish and reversing it and taking off the tenon or the recess on the bottom. And the only way that I know of that you can put this back on the lathe to take that recess off is either with a vacuum chuck or a jam chuck of some sort. Okay, any questions? Tom?
You put the rings in the last one you showed me. You have to do that with you put those huge rings in. When you put the rings on the outside edge.
You're talking about the beading?
Yeah, beading, okay.
The way I did the beading was when it was on center, I beaded almost all of the bottom. I knew that a good portion of it was going to get turned away, so I beaded actually almost all of the top. When it was on center and it was mounted this way, I beaded the whole top with the exception of, right in the very middle, because that was going to go away anyhow. And the same thing if you were using a texturing tool or your Sorby tool that Tom uses a lot. You can do that while you're mounted on center this way. You can do anything you want on that rim to decorate it. You could put a bead on, just one bead on the top around the edge. You actually could bead this. You could put a bead on the wing. Pretty much anything you want to do while it's on center. Once you go off center, there's not much you can do with it then. Okay, any other questions? No? You guys are easy.
I do have one question. So for those of us without lathes that are that big, how big can we do it on I have a 1-horse jet.
On a 1-horse jet?
Yeah, so.
Well, you usually, most of the jets are like 12 inches.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think you could, I think that would be pushing your luck.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So.
This is 10 inches. I'm not sure that you could go even this big off center, because when you're off center, let's see what I've got here.
I saw the whole thing shaking with that piece of wood, so I was just kind of.
I'm to the outside of the wing, it's 5.5 inches right now.
Yeah.
So that means you're 11 inches. You need to turn this like this. You need an 11-inch swing. The weight. The weight.
I was watching when we were doing the off-center part. The whole thing was shaking.
Yeah.
So, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, when you're.
Am I doing like a 3-inch?
When you're turning it to take away this bulk.
Yep.
It might be too much for a 1-horsepower lathe. I don't know. I've never done it on a small lathe. I have a Grizzly with 3 horsepower, so I have no problem. Just like this had no problem. It did shake some, but I was able to get up a pretty good speed on this, and speed helps a lot.
All right. Yes. Well, if I'm not here next month, you'll know why.
On the one you're holding, the screw chuck is in the base of the bowl. On the other one, it was in the wing portion of the bowl.
I screwed up.
Okay.
You weren't supposed to notice that. You weren't supposed to notice that. I thought I slid that one right through. Yeah, when I had it mounted on the screw chuck the last time, I screwed it up. I did the wrong thing. Okay, I should have been putting that off-center recess in and then flip it around. Oh well. Yeah. Oh well. I guess I'm not as good at faking it as I thought I was, huh?
Any other questions?
And I do have copies of this. Am I off now? Am I on?
No, you're on.
Okay. I do have copies of this if anybody wants one. What was up on the screen earlier. You're certainly welcome to it. Any other questions? Nothing? Okay. Keys to do this. You're blanked. Parallel sides as flat as possible, so that when you're done, your wing ends up being consistent all the way around. It's never going to be perfect. It's wood. It's not perfection. Okay? And this one, you can see here, which camera am I on now? This one. Okay, if you can, I don't know how well it comes off on the screen. It's pretty thin there, and it's a fair amount thicker over here. It's not crazy difference, but it's definitely a noticeable difference in the thickness. So parallel, lay it out carefully so that you have, a pretty big amount of space out here. You don't want a giant amount, because that's just a rough turn when you're taking that off center, when you're taking all this weight off of here. Depending on the piece of wood, that piece of wood actually was coming off easier than I expected it. When I did this one, it was I guess it's a lot harder piece of wood, and it was a bucking bronco. I mean, it was beating me up pretty good. So, and that's when I decided that I needed to switch blanks in the middle of this thing. I probably could have gotten away with not doing that until I screwed it up. But there it is.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think Tom's right on that. If you better not have it on a stand on wheels or a
I do
rickety
have it on
wooden
a
stand.
And I have about 350 pounds of stuff on the base to hold it still. But you know, I've also hurt myself because of something that got off balance. So.
I would say try doing an 8-inch one.
Okay.
A 2-inch thick 8-inch piece,
Okay.
and see how it goes. And that'll tell you, what you can do. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
You could do, but then on that 1 horsepower, you're adding more weight too. So you're going to be on your balance will be better, but you're asking that small motor to do more work because you're, carrying some extra weight. But hey, it's worth a try, But
This is all just one big challenge to me, so I'm all excited about it.
It is. I would say try an 8-inch and see how it goes.
Okay.
And the farther you are off center with the second cut with the bowl, the more stress there's going to be on the lathe.
Okay.
So I'd say try 8 inches and try to have a smaller wing, just as a test and see how it goes.
Okay. So we have the handout up here.
Right there.
Charlie will also put it up on the website, so if you don't get a copy here, you can always grab that. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
So for the President's Challenge today, you may all find it shocking, but Jerry is the number one vote getter today. So congratulations. Next month is a off-center bowl for the challenge.
Oh, it's an off-center winged bowl.
Off-center winged bowl. I'll make sure that that goes out properly, and then or a bowl. So just to make sure nobody gets too hurt by next month. So thank you. Have a great day.